You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And welcome to our season finale, because we're going on hiatus until September 16th. Of course, if something super major occurs that sends me flying to my keyboard and microphone, why, then I'll pop up online, or if you subscribe to the podcast, I'll pop up directly into your email. I'm hoping, however, to get a different kind of writing done, as well as snatch a bit of sleep between political work. We all know this is an organizing summer, but a bit of sleep is crucial because the fall and winter are going to be dramatic. It's been a historic year. In the words of Dickens, the worst of times and the best of times. The worst needs no explaining, I'm afraid. The best is you, and all the good plain Americans who are registering voters, marching, sitting in, pressuring elected representatives, arguing with friends and relatives and neighbors, deciding to run for office, fighting for others as well as themselves, shouldering the real responsibilities of citizenship, and doing so with everyday courage. My sole special guest today is a perfect fit for our season finale because she embodies that kind of courage and even turns it into art. Deeyah Khan, award-winning filmmaker, feminist, and activist, returns to the program to discuss her searing new documentary, White Right, Meeting the Enemy. Warning, our conversation and her film may change your thinking. And of course, we have Surrealism Corner, and we have Fighting Words, and we have, first of all, to go inside the headlines. I thought this week I'd start with a statistic about this country's security and intelligence agencies. You know, the ones Trump is trying to use for target practice, though he's a lousy shot. In 2016, women comprised just 16% of criminal investigators employed at those agencies, even though women account for 57% of the rest of the agency's workforces. Interjection from me. That must be your secretarial, clerical, accounting, data generation, analysis, and, oh yes, of course, housekeeping. Back to statistics. Within the work cultures of those agencies, criminal investigators, special agents, or deputy marshals are widely regarded as the most important and influential employees and the ones most likely to receive big promotions. The numbers vary by agency, but they're all depressingly disproportionate. At the FBI, for example, about 1 in 5 special agents are women. The ratio is about 1 in 10 deputy marshals. Are you feeling safer now? Yet another reason to get our blood pumping for the midterms, because state governments control redistricting. New Democratic governors could help cement whatever House gains we make, or at least could block Republicans from repeating the post-2010 gerrymandering that helped entrench their power in Congress. The November election could have decadal significance because of redistricting. That's according to Governor Jay Inslee of Washington State. He's the chair of the Democratic Governors Association. The GOP knows this very well. On a scale not seen for decades, the Endangered Species Act, which for 45 years has safeguarded fragile wildlife while blocking ranching, logging, and oil drilling on protected habitats, is coming under attack from lawmakers, from the White House, and from industry. It's driven partly by fears that the Republicans will lose ground in November's elections. In the past 3 weeks, more than 24 pieces of legislation, policy initiatives, and amendments, all designed to weaken the law, have been introduced or voted on in Congress or proposed by the Trump regime. And while we're on the subject of our blue planet's health, and consequently our own, we might note that climate change has tragically unexpected effects, as well as those we already know. Suicide is more common on unusually hot days, and the authors of a recent study in the Journal of Nature estimate that by 2050, climate change will cause an additional 14,020 suicides in the U.S. alone. The magnitude of this change is on par with the estimated impact of economic recessions. Glancing abroad, the Associated Press reports that Japan recently recorded the country's highest ever temperature, 41.1 degrees Celsius or 106 degrees Fahrenheit, in a city northwest of Tokyo called Kumagaya. More than 40 people have died in Japan in an unprecedented heat wave that has lasted for nearly 2 weeks, and the death toll from heat waves across Indonesia and India is rising steadily and alarmingly. These days, India, the world's so-called largest democracy, has been killing women at an even faster rate than the heat. In fact, a poll released in June by the Thomson Reuters Foundation named India the most dangerous country in the world for women, ahead of war-torn countries like Afghanistan and Syria, ahead of conflict zones like Congo. A rape occurs at least every 20 minutes, according to data from India's own National Crime Records Bureau, and that's, of course, based only on those rapes reported. The latest atrocity, in a gated community in the southeast coastal city of Chennai, has horrified the nation. For 7 months, an 11-year-old girl who lived with her parents was given drugged soft drinks while a group of 17 men took turns filming her, raping her, brandishing knives, and threatening to release the videos if she told her family. The men were employees of the apartments. In January, an 8-year-old was kidnapped, locked in a Hindu temple, gang-raped, and beaten to death. In May, a teenager in central India was set on fire after her parents told a village council that men in the area had raped their daughter. In June, a 7-year-old was raped in the state of Madhya Pradesh, and afterward the 2 men slit her throat and left her to die. The reasons for this national assault on women and girls? Well, India's lax prosecution and low conviction rates for sexual assault, combined with revenge sexual crimes committed in religious feuds between Hindus and Muslims, the prevalence of lynch mobs killing dozens of people falsely accused of kidnapping children, and the persistence of village councils where men mete out their own punishments and national laws are ignored, as well as epidemic corruption of the police, these are all part of the problem. But India is not a democracy if half its population is silenced through terror. Violence against women is also on the increase in a direct parallel to the rise of the current strongman dictator President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Turkish Islamist Justice and Development Party. His public statements and policies have pointedly degraded women. In 2016, he called women without children deficient, and his deputy prime minister said that a woman should never laugh in public. Erdogan has thrown Turkey's court system into turmoil since the failed coup in 2016, further delaying slow-moving criminal proceedings. He has made it clear that violence against women is a low priority and that men who appear remorseful should get off easily. Until recently, there's been a lack of reliable statistics, but now women's rights organizations like We Will Stop Femicide and the Femicide Map have begun to keep more accurate records and note that nearly 2,000 women have been killed across the country in the past 8 years, parallel to his rise. Now, in my ongoing quixotic attempt to end on a hopeful note or two, there are actually 3 items. First, the news break about Michael Cohen's decision to fight back against Trump's throwing him under the bus was major, or, as Trump would say, bigly important. We've had so many moments of, surely this must be the one that will undo him, that it's hard to recognize a real one when it comes along. But for those of us who lived through Nixon's seemingly impossible fall, the release of this first tape, secretly recorded by Cohen, is a Watergate watershed moment. Remember that almost 40% of the American public still backed Nixon until the tapes emerged. So while we can't yet know the full impact of this first tape, reportedly the mildest of 12 tapes yet to come, this is, if not the turnaround moment, at least the road sign warning sharp turns ahead. Second, the July 19th issue of the New England Journal of Medicine has published findings from the largest, longest-running study ever to track development of children in planned lesbian families. The study by Dr. Nanette Gartrell and her team has been following the same group of mothers and offsprings, conceived through donor fertilization, since the 1980s. Over the years, the research has found that these kids are faring as well or even better than other U.S. kids their age. The study began in 1986 when many people assumed that kids of same-sex couples would grow up and turn out badly. But the reality doesn't match the stereotypes. One set of findings, published in 2010, showed that at age 17, kids of lesbian moms had fewer behavioral problems versus the norm for U.S. teens. Beyond that, none of the teenagers said they'd ever been physically or sexually abused by a parent or other caregiver, far different from the norm for U.S. adolescents. There are no comparable long-term studies of children raised by gay male couples, but it's only in more recent years that they have been building families in sizable numbers. The full study can be found online at the New England Journal of Medicine. I'm afraid I have to add one sour note, however. This report from the National Longitudinal Lesbian Family Study was published 7 days after the House Appropriations Committee passed an amendment to a federal funding bill that would allow adoption agencies to deny services to same-sex couples based on religious or moral beliefs. Lies won that round. But bravo to the researchers, and let's hear it for real factual science. And last, real factual science has brought us this story, too. It looks more and more likely that a body of liquid water stretching at least 20 kilometers or 24 miles across exists under the icy surface of Mars' southern pole. That's according to new research just published in the journal Science. So I see 3 possibilities. If you can't charge hell-bent for election and change this nightmare in November, why, you'd best hurry up and get yourself a lesbian mom or two, or else start planning your move to Mars. It's time for a quick break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be back directly with the Surrealism Corner.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back, and come with me into the Surrealism Corner. Ivanka Trump is closing her namesake fashion brand about a year after claiming she was stepping down from her role at the company to take a senior position at the White House. In a statement, she said, After 17 months in Washington, I do not know when or if I will ever return to the business, but I do know that my focus in the foreseeable future will be the work I am doing here in Washington, so making this decision now is the only fair outcome for my team and partners. Pause here for gales of uproarious laughter. What's unsaid? The Ivanka Trump line, which sells clothing, accessories, and shoes, has taken a massive financial hit, a death blow, since Trump's hostile takeover of the White House. Apparently, not even all those illegally obtained patents for China could save it. Triumphant boycotts of the brand, which was eventually pulled from Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom's, and Hudson's Bay because of plummeting sales, have won the day. Congratulations, women! Albert Einstein's travel diaries have only recently been published, and they prove that just because you may be a genius in physics, you are not necessarily smart. However, they also prove something hopeful, that bigotry can be unlearned, maybe. In 1922, the same year he received the Nobel Prize in Physics, he and his second wife, Elsa, took a 5.5-month journey through the Far East and the Middle East. In the understated words of Princeton University Press, which published the first full English-language edition of the diaries, quote, Einstein's stereotyping of members of various nations raises questions about his attitude on race, close quote. I'll say. About mainland China, he writes that he had observed, quote, industrious, filthy, obtuse people. He goes on, quote, it would be a pity if these Chinese supplant all other races. For the likes of us, the mere thought is unspeakably dreary. A peculiar, herd-like nation, often more like automatons than people. In Japan, quote, intellectual needs of this nation seem to be weaker than their artistic one. Natural disposition? Question mark? Close quote. I must tell you that, as usual, because women are always the canaries in the mine, his sexism predates his racism. When his first marriage of 11 years' duration to another scientist, another physicist, in fact, Mileva Maric, was falling apart, the final blow to the marriage came after he wrote a misogynistic manifesto to her, in which he demanded that, among other things, she keep his room tidy, bring him 3 meals a day, and stop talking when he requested, with no expectations that he would return the favor. A few months after this manifesto, she left, and they divorced in 1919. They had met as young students at the Zurich Polytechnic, where she was the only woman in her group, and where her grade in physics was the same as Einstein's. Mileva's name is listed as co-author with Albert in his early work, and scholars still debate her influence over his later work. By the way, she was friends with Marie Curie, whose husband, Pierre, did not demand that she stop her physics when they married. We have no idea whether Einstein's views on women evolved or not, and I'm afraid there's little evidence that they did, but his views did vastly improve regarding racism, so much so that he became known as a champion of human rights, and his profile as handed down to us is that because he was a German-born Jewish scientist targeted by the Nazis, he felt a natural empathy for people of different ethnicities. 5 women are suing the British government and the European Court of Human Rights over the issue of male primogeniture, that is, that inheritance of title, land, and privileges pass to the next male relatives and so on down the male line and never to a female. In 2013, Britain enacted gender-blind changes to the law of succession before the first pregnancy of Kate Middleton and Prince William. But they did so only for the direct line of succession to the crown itself, not for other nobility, dukes, earls, and the like. The 5 women bringing the suit are Lady Willa Franks, a descendant of former Prime Minister Lord Balfour, Hatta Bing, eldest daughter of Viscount Torrington and the editor of Britain's House and Garden magazine, Lady Eliza Dundas, eldest daughter of the Earl of Ronaldshay, Sarah Long, eldest daughter of the 4th Viscount Long of Wraxall, and the ringleader, Tonya Field, who today would be one of the senior aristocrats in Britain as Earl of Macclesfield, living in Sherborne Castle, but for her vagina. I need to stop for a spot of tea after saying all those names, and by names I mean Ronaldshay and Waxall, not vagina. Tonya Field, age 46, doesn't use her ladyship titles because she says it gives people the preconception that you're somebody elite, while she spends her days as a social worker involved with troubled youth in poor neighborhoods. She works for a local community association and has lived for years in a semi-detached house on the outskirts of Oxford. She's well aware of how ridiculous her fight may appear to many people, but there is a method in her madness, because Parliament's House of Lords has 92 seats reserved for hereditary peers, and the law as it stands means these are effectively only for men. In an interview with the Daily Beast, Field said that she believes her extensive work as a community activist could make good use of a seat in Parliament. She says, "You're told primogeniture is normal, so the condition runs very deep. But whatever you think about the House of Lords or hereditary titles in general, Britain needs to be in line with 2018, not 1618 thinking. It is outrageous that progressive modern Britain is keeping back the seats for men. We just want equal rights for women. The government is clearly in breach of Article 3, Protocol 1 of Human Rights Law, which prohibits discrimination based on gender." Close quote. Check out hashtag #ElectLordsWomen and the campaigners behind the lawsuit at daughtersrights.co.uk. This might seem like a classic, frivolous lawsuit story, but there's something delicious about the House of Lords being used as a platform for addressing problems of troubled kids in poverty. And last, a model for those who want the ultimate diet, to lose not just a few pounds, but to keep them off. Oh, wonder how many goodly creatures are there here. No, I'm not channeling Miranda in The Tempest. I'm talking about the Gigantodelta chessoia, a shelled slug that lives around the scorching hydrothermal vents in the ocean off the coast of Antarctica. The Royal Society is reporting that it undergoes a metamorphosis unlike any other animal ever observed on the planet. We call it crypto-metamorphosis, says Dr. Chong Chin, a deep-sea biologist at the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology, who uncovered this process. Once the snail reaches a certain body length, its digestive system just stops growing. Its teeth, stomach, and intestine give way for an expanding esophageal gland, and that gland gets so big it takes up most of the snail's body. Bacteria then colonize it, and the snail, which did graze for food when it was smaller, no longer needs to eat. It just sits there, surviving on energy the bacteria produce inside of it. Dr. Chen says that this crypto-metamorphosis could be common in other animals, and that if we looked closely enough, it might be present in systems like forests or coral reefs, but not, unfortunately, on the shelf with your local diet aids. Surreal. It's time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and it's fitting that for our season finale, this next segment features my special guest, Deeyah Khan. This next segment will challenge your basic assumptions in ways that require more courage from you and me than facing a mob screaming hatred. So hold hands, stay tuned, and that's coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My guest, Deeyah Khan, is a Norwegian film director and a human rights, notably women's rights, defender. She is of Punjabi Pashtun descent. She was born in Norway. She's the founder and the CEO of the production company Fuse, which specializes in documentary films, digital media, platforms, and content for television broadcasters and live events. Her debut film as director and producer won a Peabody and an Emmy Award. This was Banaz, A Love Story, in 2012, and it was nominated for British Royal Television Society as Best Current Affairs Documentary. Her second documentary, Jihad, A Story of the Others, received BAFTA, Grierson, and Monte Carlo Television Festival nominations for Best Current Affairs Documentary. She's also the founder and editor of Sisterhood magazine, which spotlights the diverse voices of Muslim women and women of Muslim heritage, and is among her most personal Fuse productions. In 2016, she became the inaugural UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador for Artistic Freedom and Creativity. She's also a finely trained musician. Even as a prodigious child, she was, and a composer. So the achievements and excellence of Deeyah Khan are neither simple nor short. I would suggest that you check out more details online, whether about the magazine Sisterhood or about Memini, a global digital initiative she formed in 2011 to promote remembrance of victims of honor killings worldwide, or her many other creative, artistic, and impactful actions politically and humanistically. Her TED Talk from 2016 titled, What We Don't Know About Europe's Muslim Kids and Why We Should Care, is highly popular. And she has been a guest on this program once before, and we bonded in a very special way, I must say. So it is my deep delight to have her back again, in particular because she's now come out with yet another film, which I'm sure will be yet another prize winner, which is called White Right, Meeting with the Enemy. And it is memorable, and it changes you. So we're going to talk about that, and about Deeyah, and about the political situation in the world, and what women can do about it without losing our own souls into the bargain. Deeyah Khan. Dear Deeyah, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
I've missed you.
I've missed you too.
You have been busy, however. You have done in your career laden with Emmys and Peabodys, and you have done the film we really need right now, and it is on Netflix. It's just extraordinary. White Right, Meeting the Enemy, and like the wonderful, crazy woman you are, as a woman of color, there you went in with your camera into the heart of Nazi groups and skinhead groups, and interviewed it's just a breathtaking film. Talk about how this came to be.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, it means so much to me, this coming from you. But so, yes, it was a little bit crazy, because what ended up happening is I did an interview with the BBC where basically what I did is that I endorsed diversity and multiculturalism, and said to the effect of, we're going to have to, as a society, come together and build a future where we all belong, where we can all flourish and all be included and all contribute. This interview that I did ended up going viral and somehow managed to find its way to violent neo-Nazi groups in America and in other countries, but predominantly in America, who then spread this interview everywhere within their networks. And the reaction to that was I was inundated with death threats.
Yeah.
And all various horrific descriptions of what was going to happen to me because I had, in their opinion, committed white genocide by saying that, it's a fact that, Britain is never going to be white again. It's going to, it's going to be multicultural. That's what it is. That's a fact. That's not something I've made up or I've caused.
But I might interject that you also, I've seen that BBC interview, and you also say that whites in Britain have to get, you're talking about Britain, obviously, and you say that whites have to get used to that. And also people who come from the global south or other countries have to understand they can't just recreate that country in the north. They also have to, I mean, it's an incredibly fair-minded.
It's a very balanced.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I thought it was a very generic, very obvious kind of statement to make.
It was.
And that it's, so the reaction to it was so severe. And to be honest, as we talked a little bit about last time, I've lived with death threats from, Muslim extremists most of my life. So death threats is nothing new and not something that's, doesn't really stop me from anything anymore. And so when I was getting these, I sort of laughed it off, to be honest, in the beginning, just going, this sounds like exactly the same guy. All the descriptions of what they were going to do sounded exactly the same. So this is familiar. I'm used to this. Never mind. But then the BBC called and lots of other people called and said, look, this is much darker, much worse than anything that we've ever had. And you really need to take this seriously and you need to be in touch with the police. Yeah. Police got involved. Anyway, it was became quite serious.
Oh, dear.
And then I decided to not accept this and to not do what was intended, because the intention was obviously to scare me and to make me either go quiet or to, fear for my life. I decided not to give them the reaction that they wanted. Instead, I grabbed my camera and decided to go to America and to look for people who believe these things and people who would react to me in this sort of way and to see. I mean, I wasn't really angry or anything like that. I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't looking for a confrontation. What I was really looking for was to find a way to sit down and have a conversation with each other as human beings and to see whether it's possible for people who are so different from each other to be able to retain their own humanity and see the other person's humanity and just sit and talk in spite of the very apparent differences that we have. And is it possible for me to understand where they're coming from and what drives some of this on a personal level? Yes. So it was more kind of a mission for me to try and understand them so that I can also liberate myself from the fears that I did used to have from people like this when I was growing up. Because I've this is not the first time I've had run-ins with fascists and racists. Yes. I've experienced a lot of racism, huge parts of my life. Yeah. So I wanted to sit down face to face and see if it's possible for us to be human in each other's presence.
Well,
that was the goal, really.
And you succeeded. I mean, there is this frame after frame, interview after interview of this, small, delicate, sweet woman, in a soft voice saying, well, now, why do you believe this? What happened when you were 13 and you suddenly fell in love with Nazism? What happened? Probing gently. And of course you get through. I mean, because they don't know quite what to do with you. I mean, three of them, three different ones, of neo-Nazis, consider you by the third or fourth interview their friend, and then they don't know what to do that they have a mud person for their friend, and you press them on that very gently but very tenderly but very persistently. Well, would you have me deported? Well, I would have to have you deported. And then later he changes. I mean, you reach the humanity in them. So that I cried at another number of points, not in sympathy for them, but at the just overall tragedy and waste of the situation, their confusion about manliness and manhood and violence and being threatened, and but we can't do this one-on-one, Deeyah. How can we broaden those I mean, if we could send you out to speak with every individual, neo-Nazi, we would eventually win this thing. But I don't know how. I do think this. I think the film shows unavoidably how we, at least for our own soul's sake, should remember that they are human beings. And that is a moral victory in itself. Because you're giving them no quarter. You're not saying treat them nicely or leave them alone or let them do what they want. On the contrary.
Yes. It's I completely agree with you. For me, it was so important I'm not interested in their ideology, to be honest. I know what they believe. Right. I know what they think. I know how they behave. To me, it was important, who are they as human beings and why do they believe the things that they believe? And I also came to sort of realize that, if I deny their humanity, then in a way I'm losing my own in the process.
Right.
And that's not something I'm willing to, that's not a trade-off that I'm willing to do. And also, having, being a woman of color myself, I know what it feels like to be stereotyped. I know what it feels like to be hated. I know what it feels like to be the other or to be the source of someone's disgust. And so I'm unwilling to do that to somebody else, even if it is somebody that I completely and utterly disagree with. But at the same time, the film, the gesture in the film is not to try and invoke any kind of sympathy for the guys or to say that, what they think is okay, or let's just hug a Nazi and these problems will go away.
No.
Obviously racism, it's a systemic problem in America and in so many other places. And these issues aren't just going to go away nicely and too easily. But for me, on a personal level, I really desperately need to understand, or wanted to understand, what is the appeal? What emotional, psychological, social needs do these movements satisfy for young men like this? Right. Because whatever it's satisfying is whatever we're not providing.
Yes,
the hate, because people always think about hate, they think about violence when they think about groups like this. Yeah. And that's, of course, a part of the picture, but that's not the entire picture. Yeah. And, extremists of all stripes, they fill voids in people's lives or in societies. Right. So wherever we're not picking up, these groups are. And to me, that's actually a huge source of hope in some ways, because that means that we can do something about the alienation of young men. We can do something about the questions of masculinity and manhood and shame and humiliation that, a lot of men, not just white men, but a lot of men struggle with.
That's right.
But you just have different men manifesting that angst and that anger and that fear into violence in different ways, whether it's, Muslim extremists, our young boys, becoming jihadis, whether you have,
it's the same thing.
Guys, it's exactly the same thing. So we have to start unpicking this from the very roots of it and not just think, well, he's a Nazi, so I refuse to engage with him, because that doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't make their opinions go away. In fact, it entrenches them even further.
Exactly.
You're saying, we can't do this one-to-one, or that would, that's not necessarily that practical. But I think that we might have to just keep doing this one-on-one because, we can do that. We can do that, through our schools, through our education system, through our local communities. It is going to take human connection. It is going to take them being exposed to people that they dislike and people that they hate, whether it's people of color, whether it's immigrants, whether it is women. But the more time they can spend with any of those people, the hatred does melt away.
Yes.
It really does, because it's very difficult to hate in person. It's very, very difficult. Some people manage it, but very few.
You can see it in the utter confusion that they're on their faces about you.
Yeah.
Because despite themselves and everything they've spouted and everything they've heard and learned that makes them feel powerful and manly and all of that, they like you and they can't reconcile, it just doesn't parse for them. Some years ago, I don't know if you ever saw it, but there was a really fine fictional American film called American History X with Edward Norton.
Yes.
And your film reminded me of it, except that's fiction and yours is real. And it brought up my own it challenged me morally, because you're quite right. It's so easy to just categorize and dismiss. Yeah. And we can't afford to, particularly since Trump gave them credence and support, and they know it. I mean, they say it, out loud.
Absolutely.
Given the crisis that this country is in and the way that unfortunately leaches out around the entire world, we can't afford to just dismiss it. We can't, it's not possible.
I agree. And I think, if because Trump and other leaders like him have been so cynical and so successful in manipulating and taking advantage of a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of pain and a lot of and some very legitimate issues that a lot of even these guys have, and directing it towards their own politics and their own goals, I think it's up to the rest of us now to dismantle a lot of those reasons and to take back the conversation into our side, so that the far right isn't able to use it to do what they're doing at this point. I mean, I think a huge part of that is we cannot afford to be arrogant and to be self-righteous and to give up on people. Doesn't matter how hopeless they seem. There's always a little bit of hope. And I think our humanity is also at stake if we refuse theirs. It's very, very easy to condemn them. It's so and in fact, it's not just easy. It feels really good. I've done it most of my life.
Yes.
It feels good. It's very satisfying. It makes me feel really good about my views and what I come from and my politics and all of that. But that doesn't solve anything. No. And the reason these guys also didn't know how to react to me, other than the fact that they've never actually sat down with anyone like me and spent any kind of meaningful time together, they know how to react. They expected me to come in swinging and fighting them and just throwing something in their face, and I didn't. And that's what confused them. It's they know how to react to accusations and to anger and to my hostility.
Yes.
And in fact that makes them very, very happy. That's the terms that they want to engage on, because then they can come out as the victim or as the victor. They can stick to their talking points, and we would do nothing but talk in circles, talking about did Hitler do this? Did he not do this?
Right.
Did the Holocaust? Did not the that it's just that those are pointless conversations to have. So it's more about who are you and who am I, and we're in this together, and we have to figure out a way to live together. The alternative is violence. And we cannot afford that.
What a remarkable woman you are, and what a remarkable filmmaker you are, because this translates into reality, and watching these men's faces try to deal with cognitive dissonance that you present to them gently, never raising your voice, quietly in fear for your life at that moment, but showing no fear, is just an amazement. It's an extraordinary film. Thank you for it, Deeyah. It's called,
thank you so much, Robin.
The film is called White Right, Meeting the Enemy. It's on Netflix. Please, listeners, see it. It will change your perspective and broaden it and deepen it and give you hope. And we desperately need hope in these troubled times. Bless you, dear Deeyah, and thank you for being back with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin, for having me.
We have to take one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back once more to some fighting words. I've been thinking about my conversation with Deeyah Khan. I've been thinking how casually, how unobtrusively she wears her courage, like an ordinary, wrinkled old scarf flung comfortably over one shoulder. There's no grandstanding about her. She's no Martin Luther King Jr. Then again, Martin Luther King Jr. was no Martin Luther King Jr. either. He was unfaithful to Coretta, had affairs outside his marriage, was given to temper outbursts, and felt normal, understandable fear. But for the time and his capacity, he did his best, and it was a very fine best indeed. We tend to make such people into saints, a convenient way of putting them safely beyond reach of our own ordinary capacities to incarnate such behavior ourselves. But superhuman doesn't exist any more than subhuman does. Only fascistic thinking requires superhumans and subhumans. In truth, there's just human. Democracy depends on ordinary people, because ordinary is a word that really has no meaning. Ordinary is just a sizable collection of uniquenesses. I've been thinking about how much Deeyah's ordinary, unique courage expresses itself as patience, although an urgent patience. And I've been thinking about how one of my worst character flaws is impatience. Yes, certainly some of this has to do with the effects of our cultures. She emerges through Europe's centuries, from the millennia of the East, while I'm a second-generation European-American, born into a country less than 300 years old and bred in the swift rhythms of New York. But that doesn't explain the whole of my sometimes frenzied impatience, because the fact is that time is short and the planet can't stand much more of this. Yet the shadow trailing my impatience is about something other than fact. I think it's about rage, a corrosive, enveloping rage that equals the energies of those who hate everything we are and do. The people who hate women and other humans with different melanin content in their skins, and hate those who are older or younger or poorer than them, who look different or speak differently, who can't move quite as quickly, who know more than they do, or who know less. The people who hate what they can't understand. I don't understand them, the people who hate what they can't understand. And so I hate them. Then I am them. So I keep saying, hurry up, Mr. Mueller, even though his investigation is already moving at light speed when compared with Watergate, because he's dedicated to following the rules impeccably. I keep fretting over delays in lawsuits, committee reports, anything that so devoutly follows the rules, the laws, the systems, that it delays the downfall of this regime. I know that preserving the system, the rule of law, is paramount, because the alternative is chaos and destruction of the Republic. But the shadow murmurs, to hell with the rules. Why do we always have to play by the rules when they don't? Why do we have to go high when they set up permanent residence down low? I don't think I'm kidding myself when I feel this internal tension is experienced by many others searching for their everyday courage in our remarkably ordinary resistance. Yet I know that if we do descend to their thinking and their tactics, however almost overwhelmingly tempting it is to deliberately enter that inferno, then we succumb to their vision of life on earth as they define it: villainy and violence, emptiness, despair. That is not the world we glimpse and fight for, imperfect as ours is. Still, we can be grateful even for the imperfections, because that's how evolution happens, and because the imperfections leave us a job to do, a way to be helpful, to contribute. Deeyah is right in the long run. She's especially wise to place her trust in the patient development of that humanity in practical and even self-serving terms, because our struggle is ultimately not self-sacrificing or saintly, but selfish in the best sense. I've always been horrified when the word selfless is used as a compliment, most commonly for women. Selfless, lacking a self. It's appalling if you think about it. On the contrary, the reasons we choose this fight and this perspective involve selfishness in the best sense, because it means we welcome the survival of all life on the planet into our concept of self, and we simultaneously try to bring ourselves into sync with the planet's life forms. And creating that concept of self, whatever its practical result, or however long it takes to have any result at all, is itself a process toward joy. It's beyond revolution. It's evolution. Virtues like patience, forgiveness, trust itself have been so cheapened by being mass-produced as Hallmark cards and processed into trademarked formula by religions that now they seem puerile, flabby, washed out, and cynicism seems to be the only sane response. If you stop and examine how they got that way, however, you realize they've been feminized and thus trivialized in a patriarchal culture where qualities like agitation, vengeance, and vigilance are awarded great value. For decades, I've ended speeches to students with the exhortation to carry yourself as someone who will save the world, because you will. Years after, various individuals have written me that they've never forgotten those words, which have affected how they live their lives. I'm very grateful. So now I guess I can say to each of us magnificently ordinary resistors of any age, students in school or each of us studying everyday survival, carry yourself as one who is saving the world, because you are. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for us today and for this season. We'll be on hiatus until September 16th, unless emergency developments send me flying through the air on my broomstick with a breaking news commentary. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. You can also stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast at iTunes, at Stitcher, and at Google Play. Be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. My just-out book, Dark Matter, New Poems, is available online and off wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Take a breath of time to replenish your strength. It's going to be a dramatic autumn and winter. And mark your calendar to join us again on September 16th, right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.